the chat. I've had plenty of coffee today, so it won't be quite as jumbled as I was yesterday. True story. I actually got several wasp or bee stings on my foot. So yesterday I was in more than a fair bit of pain. So that's probably why I was a bit scatterbrained. I decided to delete the stream from LinkedIn Live just because I just didn't feel like it. But I forgot that I also stream to several other platforms. I'm using something called Restream, so I can actually stream live to about 30 separate platforms at the same time. So although I love my LinkedIn, I love all my audience, but LinkedIn folks tend to be the most engaged and most loyal. I do know from experience that the chat supposedly, it actually does work. So I actually can see the chat and where it came from. I am loading up this here mostly out of habit on my phone for the LinkedIn chat. It would appear it would appear that Restream has really gotten their act together and all sorts of fun stuff. I can actually, from within my browser, have guests. We saw that with Sarah Dukevich last week. Trying to get a bunch of folks at work kind of interested in talking about it. Lined up a really good guy to talk about data warehousing. Awesome guy, brilliant enterprise experience. Hoping to have him on this soon enough. And but with that, what's the Q&A for? So the question is, what's the Q&A for? Thank you for the question, Carly. So the Q&A is going to be basically data science type questions. How do you get into data science? And depending on how much coffee I have had, it's going to be discussing any particular data science questions that you have. And she chimed in from, looks like Periscope. Awesome. You are my first person to comment from Periscope. Of course, I think I've only streamed on Periscope like twice in my life. So thank you very much. Thank you. And you can find me on Twitter at Tablet here. That's how it's pronounced. As you can see, I tell from my last name, I really like things that are hard to pronounce. Folks will call that table tier, but it actually dates back to the time when I was a tablet PC MVP. And most of y'all are probably too young to know what that is, but hey, that's cool. So first off, here's a couple of interesting books. This is something that I think I mentioned before on a previous live stream, but basically Bob Ward wrote this. Bob Ward is an awesome speaker, awesome author. And we were fortunate enough through my co-host, Andy Leonard, shout out to Andy, to have him on the show. He is kind of a big deal in the SQL world, and we were very excited. And we were very humbled when he offered to send us a signed copy of his book, which I thought was totally awesome. So I've been going through it, and it's a really good explanation in terms of how to install SQL Server on Kubernetes, how to containerize it, as well as some good poly-based content in there. So I've actually had have a customer engagement coming up soon, and it's going to be all about poly-based. So I know roughly poly-based. I kind of know it, but I really want to know it. And this book is probably going to be the way to go there. I've 1 or 2 chapters in, and I love it. It's awesome. So this is definitely it. And I chose books for the theme because one of the things I learned a couple of years ago, actually specifically it was 2016, 2017, was listening to a lot of podcasts and a lot of business books. Grant Cardone probably being the one that really kind of kicked it off. The 10x rule I bought from his site for I think it was 99 cents, right? Because I'd seen him doing a lot of live streams and stuff like that. If you don't know who he is, he's kind of like a sales kind of guru type guy. He can be an acquired taste. But he is awesome. I will say that. He definitely will motivate you and help you look at the world in a different way. The 10x rules, the short of it is, so since a lot of my audience are software engineers, there was this social media post going on about what a 10x engineer is. It's not the same thing. 10x engineering or 10x rule is basically if you want to, I don't know, I use an example from my personal life. I've recently lost 52 pounds, And when I set that goal like a year or two ago, it just seemed kind of ridiculous. And I set that ridiculous goal because that motivated me and that kept me going. Right? If you just want to lose 5 pounds, you're only going to be but so motivated. So since I reached that goal, I set another goal. Well, I'm going to lose 10 more pounds. And my weight actually went up. Now, part of that could be quarantine, part of it may not be. But I kind of realized like I didn't follow my own rule, my own advice. So I was like, I set a new goal to lose another 60, right? And doing all right with it. So, I mean, that's kind of thing. So the example he gave that really spoke to me was, he goes, imagine if, I think the exact example he used was jelly beans. And he goes, if you kind of sort of, you can take or leave jelly beans, right? If they're there, you'll eat them, but you're not going to go out of your way for them, right? And you try to drive the store to get a bag of jelly beans just for yourself. The first obstacle you come across, you're going to stop. That's it. You're like, well, I can turn around, right? So if the road was closed, it rained, it snowed, get the idea. Your tire went flat, you'd probably just stop and not get the jelly beans. But, and this is the thing that really spoke to me, particularly as a parent, if there was life-saving medicine for your child, like, at the supermarket, and it was a blizzard, it was, hurricanes and Category 5 hurricane and snowstorm, snowmageddon, you would go. Like, it wouldn't matter. Like, it's that level. So goals kind of work the same way because it's the same nervous system, right? So if your goal doesn't inspire you, it doesn't make you stop what you're doing and kind of lunge toward it, it's not going to push you. It's not going to drive you. So in the first obstacle or two you meet, you're just going to stop. And that was kind of the thing. And so getting back to the goals, and this is not a book I intended to talk about, but it is a good book to listen to. If you can get it on his site, it's like 99 cents or $5. It's on Audible. Audible is a sponsor of the podcast, Data Driven. And it's thedatadrivenbook.com. It'll route you to our special landing page on Audible, and you'll get one free audiobook. I recommend that one because that one, it'll either motivate you or it won't. May even make you go like, who is this guy? Grant Cardone, not me. You probably are already saying, who is this guy? Frank here. So I highly recommend that book. And so with that, I also listen to Ty Lopez, again, another gentleman who has a podcast with can be an acquired taste. But definitely, if you listen past the initial kind of who is this guy, there's a good message there. And one of the things he says, leaders or readers, is that the average CEO reads 52 books a year, right? And the average American barely reads one. And so I set a goal that year to read 52 books. And I think the first year I hit 51, right? Normally I would read like a dozen books a year. But I noticed that I just felt more informed, more able to connect ideas from all these different books. So the year after that, I read 60. This year, I'm shooting for 72. And I hit 37 for the first 6 months of the year. Yay me. So I'm slightly ahead. But I figured I would, a lot of people, they call it summer reading season, that sort of thing. So I figured I would make this about books. That's kind of what I'm doing. And as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, is that I don't, for a lot of these shows, I just kind of do this ad hoc. I used to do scripted shows kind of on YouTube or semi-scripted shows, and I don't know, it just didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel natural. So what you're getting is the real thing here. So straight from the feed, if you will. So here's a really good book. Let's get back to data science and such. This is the Machine Learning Pocket Reference Guide. And what's great about this is that if you're a practitioner, there's a lot of algorithms and a lot of stuff you got to keep in your head. This helps you kind of like I know what a I know what a support vector machine is, or SVM, but I can look this up in here and kind of get just like a quick thing to jog my memory. And there's even Python code to how to build out the algorithm. So it's great, handy reference to have. I love it, and I think you will too. So, and if you're not into it or you're just learning it, I think it's a good reference to have because you can kind of thumb through it. And the first or second time you read it, you may not understand it, but that's the point. If you're reading stuff and everything makes perfect sense the first time through, you're not stretching yourself enough. All right. This is another good one. Reinforcement learning is an interesting topic. Basically, it's what's going to power, I think, the next wave of innovation in artificial intelligence, and it's going to really change how we see how machines can, for lack of a better term, think. And reinforcement learning is the idea of modeling how animals learn or how natural learning takes place, where it's a reward and punishment type thing. If I go here, I will get a treat, if you will. I know it takes a bit of leap of faith to say, how does a algorithm get a reward? How does an algorithm get punished? You can see if you drop something on your foot, it's going to be painful, so you're not going to do it. You're going to avoid it. Algorithms can kind of be taught to do something very similar. And actually, I might do. It's not going to be today because I have a meeting in 20 minutes. But I do have a Jupyter notebook where I kind of show, given a bank of artificial slot machines, the algorithm will figure out the odds just by trying it out. That is a problem called explore versus exploit, and I'll get into that another time, kind of more from a beginner point of view. But this is a great book. It is a bit thick, as you can tell, but it does go hands-on in terms of learning the algorithms. What's interesting about reinforcement learning is also it really is at the confluence of not just math and computer science and programming, but also game theory and economics. There's a lot, or really more game theory. In my head, I confuse game theory and economics, but that's just me. But it's interesting. So this is what actually I think is going to be a groundbreaking technology. Arguably, it already is, because AlphaGo Zero is already out there. Along those lines, if that is a little bit scary, this is really a kind of a foundational book. And what's fascinating about this is there's a lot of code in here that kind of walks you through how to do this. But what's also fascinating is that this goes through some really good examples and ways that it really resonated with me. I haven't finished it yet, but it does talk about algorithms like SARSA and kind of go through the mathematics of it, as well as how would you represent that formula in code. Let's see. This is another interesting book. This is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. This is actually a very influential book in a lot of circles, especially hip-hop. 50 Cent, also known as Curtis Jackson, actually was so moved by the book, he came up with he collaborated with Robert Greene on one of his books, and he came up with a book called The 50th Law, which is very insightful. A lot of good stuff in there about human behavior, kind of how people act when you're successful, when you're not successful, how things kind of change. Goes into a lot of his autobiographical type experiences. I found that an amazing. I listened to that on an audiobook. That was also very good too. But this is interesting because it just kind of covers. It's not so much about accumulating power, but it's also about how do you understand it and how it affects group dynamics. For me, that's what I did. I'm not out to conquer the world. I'm not like Pinky in the Brain, but this is a very, very insightful book. And I read this a long time ago, and I always find myself seeing something in the world or, in the world at large and thinking, I think I know what's really going on. So here's a fun little thing. So I was, somehow I was traveling. I lost my bookmark. Well, anyway, there's a coaster here from some hotel I stayed at in the south of France. So that's all. Another thing, I haven't read this yet, but this definitely looks interesting. It's Business Model Generation. And it just kind of helps you think about how digital transformation is going to modify the world of business. Now, we hear this all the time, right? But how specifically? What new business models are going to become available in this new age, in this new world? What does that mean? So this is pretty cool. It's nice and graphical. So it's not a dry business book. There's a lot of examples because I mean, if you look at like Barnes and Noble versus Amazon, and no knock on Barnes and Noble, I love Barnes and Noble. I worked for them. I was the first webmaster there. Lots of good stories about the early days of Silicon Alley. But if you are part of the establishment, you're not going to see the next wave. In fact, I think one of the things that makes Mark Zuckerberg so successful is that he is keen to look out for other kids just like him and buy out their companies. And let's look at Instagram, right? I think what keeps Mark Zuckerberg up at night is he knows that as he becomes more successful, he becomes more and more of the establishment. He's going to become, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word, but he won't be able to see the next wave. He will not be able to see that. So I think he's being very aggressive in kind of keeping himself closer to the nerve of what's going to happen next. You see that with their acquisitions. They've been very aggressive about, because they know the next company is some kid in their basement or their dorm room is going to, has the potential to upend him. I know that may sound ridiculous, but if you look at taxi companies and how they've been impacted by Uber, the hospitality industry and how that's been impacted by Airbnb, we live in an era where business models can be upended overnight, and disruption is only a few hundred lines of code away. I mean, that's very transformative. So no one can really afford to be smug and kind of let their business model not change. In fact, the Toys R Us may be a poster child for that, or any traditional retailer, particularly now with COVID. I mean, that's COVID is going to destroy a lot of things, but I think it's also going to open up a lot more opportunities. I think you're seeing a lot of virtual summits come about because of that. I think I know a couple of organizers of a virtual summit who recently threw a virtual summit. Let me say that again. That came out really weird. But I know a couple of organizers that traditionally they would organize kind of in-person developer community events, and they were limited by the space they could obtain and how much that would cost. And they held an online summit about a week ago, and it was enormously successful. I think it was probably had about 3-4 times the amount of attendance over a much wider geographical area. And there were logistics to consider, but they were a lot less. You don't have to worry about food. You have to worry about, how is the room going to be full, right? So there's definitely, I think, in the span of this, by the time everything's said and done, I think there's going to be a new wave of opportunity. And if you look back throughout history, every time there's been some kind of major crisis, yes, people get hurt. Yes, there are bad times. But it changes the world, it changes society. And those who are on the cusp of the change, who are able to opportunize it or monetize it or help people just in general, right? There's a huge opportunity there. And last book, speaking of rough times, this is a really good quote book. It says, "Don't forget to sing in the lifeboats." And it's just a bunch of quotes that are very insightful for kind of the time, here's one. "A rich man is nothing but a poor man with money." I mean, it's not all about money, but it's just kind of like, this is another good one by Vince Lombardi. "It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get back up." Fun fact, he started his career at my university, at Fordham University. And was the coach there too. I think he played football and was the coach there. I know our sports center was named Lombardi Hall. So that's really all I have for the scheduled program. If you would like to learn more about data warehousing, I want to do a couple of sessions on what Microsoft has in terms of Azure Synapse and what that means. Love to have someone come on and talk about their experience running a virtual summit. I have a couple people in mind. Just have to convince them to talk about it, particularly the most recent one. And yeah, so let me know in the comments. I will be watching them, and let me know what you'd like to see here on this feed. I am going to get ready for my 4 p.m. meeting. But I just had a couple of minutes here. I just wanted to explain what happened in yesterday's live feed. Thanks for everyone who watched it live. Thanks for everyone who are watching this live. And hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn, or what other graphics do I have here? I can show. There we go. You can go over to franksworld.com for my blog, and datadriven.tv, which is the podcast I have with Andy Leonard, who is a big speaker in the community space. Here's a funny story. So we were talking about getting speakers for an event, and somebody said, well, Andy Leonard's a big speaker. And I told him, I was like, see, look, you really are respected. And he goes, no, I think they were talking about my weight. So I was like, no, man. Well, maybe both. So with that, I am signing off, and I hope you have a fabulous day, evening, or whatever time zone you're in. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, Twitter at @Tableteer, and that's it. You have a fantastic